Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to talk about the ignition coils. And what you see in the shot right now, minus this one, these were the two original coils that I pulled off the machine some time ago. The one in my left hand with the blue-gray paint is one of the original coils, original Yamaha coils. This one on my right hand was an aftermarket replacement that was installed somewhere along the way, and it's a Diamond TU, if you can see that, TU 29 12 volt. Very common coil, by the way. This diamond coil is used on many bikes, including Harley Davidsons over the years. I don't think it's made anymore, this particular coil, at least new, but you can find them out there. They're virtually identical. The original coil is just slightly, ever so slightly shorter in height. You can see that, I think, there. But for all practical purposes, in my mind, these are the same coils. As I'm preparing to mount the coils and think through what I need to do next, I did test both of these coils with a multimeter using the specifications provided by Yamaha, and they actually both tested okay, believe it or not. I was suspicious, especially on the original. But one problem on the original, when I was going to clean it up, I was going to clean them both up and repaint them to approximately this original blue-gray color here. This is a metal shell on both of them. It's steel. You can see it's very badly corroded right there after I started removing the rust. This is all rust. But as I started cleaning up, you can see that the rust penetrated the casing. So even though this tests okay, the casing is not intact. So I'm not going to continue on with this one for obvious reasons. So what I did do is I found a good used coil on eBay. This is an original Yamaha coil as well. It is a virtual match for this one, identical. So I'm going to use this one to replace the original that's got the compromised case. I did test this coil. I got it in the mail a couple of days ago, and I did test it, and it tests fine. So this seems to be a good coil as well. What I'm going to do now is take this coil all apart, including the bracket. This is the bracket off of the original bracket off of this coil, right there, which is in very good condition. A little minor surface rust, but nothing real serious. The bracket off the defective coil, defective meaning it's got a compromised case, had a bad case of rust. You can see perhaps right there in the video. I removed it. It's scarred pretty badly. It's been eroded away by the rust. So I'm going to use this clamp, clean it up, and use the 3-part Eastwood product that I had talked about before to duplicate the original zinc dichromate finish on both of these clamps. I wanted to show you this before I went ahead and started on it, so you can see what the parts look like before I did any work on them. So both of these coils will have the paint removed. I will repaint them in a blue-gray finish as close as I can match. I don't think I can get it exact, but I can get it pretty close before I go ahead and mount these back on the bike. Obviously, I'm going to end up replacing the coil wires, the plug caps that came with it. They're cheap and inexpensive and easy to replace, and I'll talk about that a little bit later when I go to mount the coils on the bike. But for now, I wanted to share with you where I'm starting with the coils and what my plan of attack. Here are the coils and the coil brackets restored just before I mount them back on the bike. Again, here's one of the originals. This is the one that had the compromised case that I spoke to earlier. These are the two that I also shared earlier that have now been repainted. This is the original color, kind of a blue-gray or kind of an odd color blue. I couldn't match that perfectly, but I did actually took this into a store and went through their paints, their spray paints. This is rattle can paint, by the way, and this is the closest I could match. So I just went with this, and this is actually a Rust-Oleum. So the two coils have been repainted. The mounting nuts, these are the original brass. Nuts have been polished and cleaned up. New washers all the way around, and generally cleaned and repainted, as you can see here. The mounting brackets I also restored using that Eastwood product, that zinc dichromate product. That's a three-part product that's designed to emulate the original plating that was put on these parts, and I've spoken to that before. One thing I did want to share with you, the reason I left this nut and washer off is these are new replacements. These are Yamaha parts. You can see the bags right here. So the nuts and washers are brand new from Yamaha, and I wanted to share with you the difference in the plating. You may have by now seen the two-part series I did on zinc plating, and I believe I mentioned during the course of that video series that the plating, in my experience, varies quite a bit in terms of finish polish, and you can see it right here, how polished that nut is and how dull that washer is. And again, both of these are new Yamaha parts. In fact, there's a part number for the nuts that I ordered directly from Yamaha, and this is the original part number called out on the microfiche. So I ordered the right part, and that's what I got. So the plating and the polishing of the plating varies a lot depending on probably their suppliers that they use in Japan, because I'm sure Yamaha, as well as the other big three, in fact I know they don't make their own nuts, bolts, and washers, general hardware anyway. They buy it from suppliers. So the hardware for these brackets have been replaced. These screws right here, these 5mm screws, are the original screws that came with the original brackets, or bracket. One of these was replaced, remember, because the finish was pitted really bad, and I got a good used one when I bought that second coil. The screws and, well, actually all the hardware, the screws, nuts, and washers are also new from Yamaha. So now these are ready to go back on the bike. In terms of the coil wires themselves, these are the originals. This one has paint on it from when I painted one of the coils, because I just used this like this to suspend the coil so I could, like this, so I could paint it. That's why you see this paint on here. The coil wires here are going to be replaced. This was one of the, in fact both of these were original. Somewhere along the way, I think they replaced this this cap. I think they originally, if I'm not mistaken, came with this style, this metal cap. And somewhere along the line, one of them was replaced with this plastic cap. I don't have the replacements or replacement. I'll probably reuse this cap and this little rubber grommet off of both of these. This one's not in the best of shape, but we'll see. I got to resource, determine what I'm going to do for the caps here. I don't have a good plan for that yet. And again, here's the original spark plug boots that came off of both of them when I got them. Now what I'm going to do in terms of the wire, this wire, I'm going to use this. And I've done this before, and these are a standard 7mm. If you measure this, this is a 7mm wire. It's ubiquitous. It's used all over the place. So I just went down to my local parts store and picked up a 7mm wire. That's what this is. It's the exact same size, brand new of course, with the spark plug caps, or boots rather, already molded in like you see here. You can see a little bit of a difference in length, but I really, at this point, I'm not concerned about that. So what I'll do when the time comes, and I won't do this right away, but what I am going to do eventually is take this wire and I'll cut it in half after the coils are mounted on the bike, and I'm ready to complete this step and source new caps for the coils, or at least one new cap for the coil, because this one I don't think is salvageable. It's pretty bad shape. And just use these everyday available spark plug wires from an automobile supply store. And then I'll cut them to length. I'll cut it here so I have equal lengths. And then when I install the coils on a bike, I'll measure them out, and they'll probably be something like, that long, as you can see there. And using the caps, I'll remount them back on the bike using this wire, which is a lot less expensive than going through the OEM. Same size wire. The boots are very equivalent to what they used back in the day. You have different styles of boots like this. This might have been an original one. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, anymore. This might have been an original. That's a two-piece. This was two-piece, but it might have been molded in. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, I'm going to use that for the spark plug wire. So as we now move on to starting the reassembly, the next phases of reassembly of the bike, one of the very first things that I'm going to mount is going to be the coils, because those go up inside of the frame. And generally when I do a reassembly of a particular bike like this with a stamped metal frame, you work from the inside out so that you don't have to take things apart to later on install other components. And when I move over to the bike and start the reassembly and doing some recording of that, I'll explain a little bit more detail what I mean by that. But here's the coils ready to go back on the bike, and this will be one of the very first things now I will install next. I'm going to now go ahead and install the brackets, the mounting brackets for the coils on the bike. I'm going to install these with a nomenclature. You can see right here where it says 12 volts with some other verbiage. I'm going to install that facing up so that in the future, if anyone is curious, the voltage of the coils is facing up when you take the tank off. It's the only reason I'm doing it that way. You'll also notice I installed the clamping screw right here also with the head facing up, only because I find that easier for me to tighten from the top than from the bottom. So we're going to go ahead now and install the clamp. I've already got some anti-seize on the threads. It's a pretty straightforward process. You just fit it in like that. There's a lock washer and a nut that goes on each of those two studs. Surprisingly, there's a lot of room inside of that frame to get your hand in. You'll notice I left the coil off before I installed, or while I'm installing the clamp. I think it'll just be easier not to have to worry about the weight of that coil and banging it around, so I'll put the coil on here next. I'm just going to tighten these nuts up. I'm going to use a ratcheting wrench rather than a socket. I think it'll work a little bit better up inside of that frame. Okay, I got the coil bracket installed. Now it's a matter of installing the coil itself. You will notice there is a positive and a negative post on these coils. I did double check the wiring, and the orange goes to the left coil, the gray on the opposite side goes to the right coil. Those are the hot wires. The brown is the common, so there's a brown on each side, and then a different color hot, orange and gray, coming up directly from the stator. I usually will place coils of this type with the studs in a vertical position like this, rather than this, because otherwise this one tends to get a little close to the frame here. So I tend to prefer to install them vertical like that. And it's just a matter of sliding it in place. In terms of how you position the clamp back, or the coil rather, back and forth like this, that's really up to you. It really doesn't make any difference how you, where you position the clamp. You can position it like that. That's probably how they were done originally, but I really don't know. It really, I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. Whatever works best for you. And now we have that one done. We can go ahead now and install these terminals coming up from the stator. Open those washers up just a little bit. I put two washers, two flat washers on there. I don't know what they originally had, because these coils, as I think I had talked about before, had been kind of hacked around and the wiring was a mess. So I really don't know whether they had a lock washer or not. I did check the parts microfiche, and it didn't indicate. So again, this is positive and that's negative. Snug those nuts up a little bit. It's too big. Must be 9mm. Yeah, it's a 9mm. Okay, got the left coil installed. Now I'll move around to the right side and do the exact same thing. Again, I'm going to install it with the 12-volt nomenclature facing up. I did leave the clamping screw out because I did a little test fit with the coil a minute ago and found that this is a little bit of a tight squeeze, and I want to avoid scratching the paint on the coil, the new paint. So I'm going to leave that open for now, slide the coil in, and then put the clamping screw in a minute here to avoid damaging the paint when I slide the coil in. You'll note also I took my watch off and rolled my sleeves up because I have to lean over the bike for this. The access hole to get at the nuts is on the left side of the bike, and the holes are on the right, so I have to lean across. So that's why I didn't want to take a chance of scratching anything. It's the same process we used just a minute ago. I'm going to put on a nut in a locking washer, which is parts called for on the parts diagram. Again, note the polarity on the coils. Spread this a little bit with fingers. The clamping screw. And then connect the wires coming from the coil, or the stator rather, to the coil. So we've got both coils left and right installed, wirings installed, and the coil caps and coil leads that go to the wire that goes to spark plugs will install another time. That'll be quite a bit later on. You will notice I have very gently bent these wires just enough so that they really don't rub against the frame. I did that on both sides here. So they just stand off of the frame of the bike a bit. This one's giving me a little trouble here. There. So that with vibration they don't abrade themselves on the frame. So the coils are complete. Now we're going to move on to installing other items such as the air cleaner, battery, and ignition switch, those kind of things. So that's it for this video, folks. As usual, drop me a note if you got any questions or thoughts. Otherwise, thanks for watching.